from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
To Panda House, boards hide the damage that's already been done. During weekend protests, windows on each side of the building were smashed out, causing thousands of dollars in damage. The owner still staying open while trying to stay positive.
There's something we have to deal with, There's nothing we can do about it, Make something good from the worst situation.
He's been dealing with a bad situation since March when the pandemic first hit. The governor's direct health measures kept many of these same businesses closed or close to it for nearly 2 months.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 10th edition of a special weekly series on Consider This, COVID-19. Today's focus, reopening Phase 2. As promised, Dr. Jeffrey Gold has returned to pick up where we left off last week. Dr. Gold is the Chancellor of UNMC and UNO. Welcome back.
Kathy, thanks so much for having me back. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
You bet. You're welcome. I want to start with that opening clip. Thoughts as you were watching that?
Well, a lot of personal emotions come back. I grew up in the inner city of New York at a time of incredible racism, and it just tore at my heartstrings to watch this happening in our very own community. It underscores the challenges we're facing as a nation and as a society that are just upfront and personal on so many different levels. And of course, not just here in Omaha, but are very critically important for the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Great universities do 3 things. We convene thinkers and from across the country and around the world to address complex issues. We support the communities that we serve, and then of course we support our own faculty, staff, and students who are also angry, confused, heartbroken, as am I. So as a university, we are focused on all of these 3 areas. We've had several important meetings. We've brought stakeholders together, and we've agreed that we're going to lean in, meaning we're going to be proactive, we're going to do things quickly, and we're going to start off by listening carefully to the communities that we serve, to our own students, faculty, and staff, and then be very strategic about making sure that our approach is a sustainable, enduring approach to try to solve some of these major challenges that we face.
Yeah, it is unsettling, Doctor, to watch those protests play out. Then you go into the whole pandemic, and
Sure.
It becomes even more troubling. As we look at this video, talk about the possible relationship between the two.
We are still somewhere in the mitigation or response stage to this pandemic, particularly here in Nebraska. We've seen a major fall off in the number of infections in some of the large coastal cities, but we're falling here in terms of the number of cases. They are going down on a daily basis, but here in Douglas County and in other parts of the state, we still have a significant amount of individuals that are being tested and a significant amount that are testing positive. And so when I see these videos and I see a large number of people who are certainly either not able to or don't believe that they should be socially distanced, they're not wearing their personal protective equipment, meaning their face mask, and they're predominantly younger people, and I get that, and there's a sense of being invincible, and obviously they're very preoccupied with the urgency and the emotion and the anger of the moment. But at the end of the day, if they become infected with this virus, and if they take that virus home to their parents and grandparents or to their children, we're going to have a very, very different problem to face in our communities. And so hypervigilance, I think, is the name of the game. We've got to be very, very careful. We've got to watch all of our communities. And this is not just about one community, Kathy. This is broadly. I mean, there are people from the whole state and surrounding areas that came here to Omaha to express their views, to express their anger and their frustration. And that's what makes America great. People can do that and should do that. But I only hope that if this goes on, that it's done in a safe way, that we protect others, and that we don't see a resurgence of viral infection and hospitalization and tragically death in some of the older, more fragile individuals.
I was going to ask you, given everything that we've witnessed, should decision makers rethink the timing of the reopening? And if not, what would be the best way for them to proceed?
So the decision makers look at a lot of different data points widely across the state, and everything from the rate of spread of the virus to the percent positive tests, the number of deaths. We also very much look carefully at the utilization of hospital beds, ICUs, and ventilators. And we look at that on a day-by-day basis. So my own view is I wouldn't change any of the schedules just yet, but what I would do is very, very carefully monitor this, as we have been doing, and be very sensitive. Even a small change in one part of the state or one part of Douglas County or even one part of the city should prompt us to rethink some of our decision making. It also is going to have another critically important effect, and that is it's going to put more responsibility on the citizens of our community to maintain their own social distancing, to hand hygiene, sanitizing surfaces, use of their mask, personal protective equipment, and most importantly, if they're ill, if they have a family member that's ill, self-isolate. Pick up the phone, call your physician or your healthcare provider, let the public health office know. Because if we can't do the necessary amount of testing of all of the contacts and then do the contact tracing that comes from that, we are going to see a wider spread of the virus, more use of our healthcare systems, and that'll cause us to take some steps backwards in terms of the opening up of the state.
Okay, and you did talk about, looking at each piece individually. There are 4 counties in Nebraska who are a little bit behind the rest of the state in terms of the way they proceed. Talk a little bit about those 4 counties, Doctor, and why there's a little bit of a lag.
So one of the interesting things about this virus is that the experience that we derive from the Diamond Princess is when you take thousands of people, you put them in a tightly contained area. They may not have the best hand hygiene. They may not be socially distanced. Staff members become ill, common dining areas, etc. And lo and behold, explosion occurs in the number of virus cases. Well, that's not totally dissimilar to some of the senior citizen long-term care facilities. That's not totally dissimilar to some of our industrial sites, particularly, as the audience I'm sure knows, in the meatpacking industry. We've seen a good deal of this because of close quarters and shoulder-to-shoulder work lines to get things done. But we've also seen the same thing in some early childhood centers, and again, all it takes, it's sort of like a tinderbox, and that, somebody strikes a match, somebody's ill, they may have no idea they're sick because of the nature of the spread of this virus. Then 2 people get sick, then 6, then 8, and it spreads. And so what we've seen in these 4 counties is they're still very much in the rapid recovery phase from some of those types of events. Now, I can tell you, since the directed health measures were most recently updated, those 4 counties are doing considerably better. And I'm going to guess in the next version, no one can predict the future, but I'm hoping, let's say, in the next version, that everybody is brought up to the same level.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Nebraskans and those who are thinking about returning to their favorite restaurant or going to the zoo or the bar, whatever the case may be. And we talked about this a little bit last time, but what should they be looking for to help reassure them that what has been done in that business has been done properly, thoughtfully, and with their safety?
And by the way, it's been my experience with very limited dining in the community. I haven't been back to the zoo yet, but I do hope to go, is that people are taking this very seriously. So they are spacing out tables in restaurants. They're not seating people in large groups at the bar. There are a lot of people using hand sanitizer on doorknobs and tabletops and And the seating, or even the seating around tables is, you know, what normally might be a 6-top or an 8-top are frequently being used for 3 people, so that even they can sit, you know, at some reasonable spacing. I mean, we're more than 6 feet apart today, which, you know, got the ruler out, and I know we are. Yeah. Not that there's anything magic about 6 feet, but it's the minimum distance that we want. So I think those are the things that the community needs to look at. But, you know, the long and the short of it is, you know, if we have an older member of our community or one of our families, particularly somebody with heart disease or asthma or, you know, being treated for cancer, or even a younger person. I got a call from a mom of one of our students recently to say that her daughter recently had a bone marrow transplant for cancer and was doing great and was a, you know, UNO student, loving it. But are we going to take the necessary precautions? And, you know, my advice to her is, sure, we're going to take every precaution that we possibly can, but they might think about an extra couple of months or a semester of remote learning before fully coming back to campus. And I think the same advice goes, frankly, to going to church, going to the movies, going to the zoo, or any of these other, you know, group-type activities. You know, think about social distancing, think about personal protective equipment, your mask, and think about not just yourself, but think about protecting others that are really most vulnerable. Because, you know, a large part of our population is fortunately very young, very healthy, very vibrant, particularly college-age students are, you know, they're strong. Many of them probably don't even know they were infected. And indeed, if you look at some of the information that's come from the United States Navy off the Theodore Roosevelt, a very significant number of the crew members of the Theodore Roosevelt actually were infected. They never knew it, looked well, felt swell, went to work, did all of their things, carried live virus, infected others. And so we need to prevent what I would call the cruise ship syndrome.
Okay. We've talked a lot about masks and this social distancing. As people are going to places, is there anything additional they can or should be doing? Let's say they go to a restaurant and they sit down at the table. Is there something they should be wiping down, anything they should be concerned about, any questions they should be asking? And then I want to get specifically to the masks, because I know that there's been talk out there that some masks are better than others. So let's first go to our personal space, maybe in a business. Is there anything we can or should be doing?
So
there?
I had an opportunity to fly back to New York recently, and I can tell you that as part of the normal greeting by the flight attendants on the plane, I was given hand sanitizer and a number of wipes. And let me tell you, I wiped down the entire seat, armrest, tray table, the whole show, and not that I took anything out of my bag. When I go into a restaurant, I bring some wipes with me. And I understand the restaurants are doing their very best, but it gives me a sense of security that in the small area that I'm going to put my hands and then feed myself, that I have that extra edge. Because, you know, we know that these sanitizers work really well. This is a virus that's very fragile in that regard, and a quick wipe will knock out over 99% of a viable virus. So it's about, you know, the balance of responsibility. I try to take care of myself, I try to take care of my family and my colleagues and friends, and at the same time I expect the same degree from others.
Okay, thank you. And these masks, Dr. Gold, is there anything we really need to know in terms of, they're so different. You know, you have one here today, we have the disposable ones, we have the fabric ones. Are there any that are
So the cloth and the paper are basically similar. I mean, the most important thing to know about these masks is that many of them have these little wire bands in them, and that's an important consideration for many of us, and that is because if you wear glasses like I do, it's really nice to get that to fit tightly across the bridge of your nose, because otherwise your glasses are going to fog up, and, you know, if you're driving or reading or whatever it is that you may be doing, you know, badness happens when your glasses fog up. We all know that. But in terms of the degree of protection, the only augmented degree of protection really is the N95 respirators. And those are commercially manufactured masks, respirators we call them, that will filter out 95% of the material in the air. And that is useful for healthcare providers, first responders, They've been used in agricultural and ranching settings for a long period of time to protect our farmers and ranchers from different types of dusts and that are typically kicked up in their areas of work. We don't recommend that for the general population. It's not necessary because, you know, masks serve a number of different purposes. One is they're, of course, a good reminder not to touch your face, which is hard for all of us to remember. But they also protect others. And that is, if you look at the particle numbers that are projected when we cough or sneeze or raise our voice. I mean, there was recently some experiences with a choir in one of our southern states. About, I think, 90 some odd members of the choir were rehearsing, and over 90 of them from one person developed COVID-19. And so the masks block the projection of these droplet particles that are in our speech. That's what the whole 6-foot thing is about. If there are droplets that I'm projecting in the conversations that we're having right now, an overwhelming majority of them by 6 feet are going to be right down to the ground. Now, some of the smallest ones, those guys and gals, they're going to make it 7 feet and 8 feet, and certainly, hopefully, the larger ones are going to be lost a lot sooner. But in a mask, you trap a lot of those particles, and that's really what it's about.
Okay, thank you. I want to change gears, and you've referenced them, but that older adult population, one of our more vulnerable, obviously, especially those in the senior living communities. Isolation has been a concern since the shutdown, right?
Yep,
so
for sure.
Not able to see their family and friends and really have those meaningful conversations and the assistance that some of those family members can give.
Sure.
With reopening phase 2, how is that going to impact what they're doing inside to keep those residents safe?
So right now, the majority or a very significant part of the spread that we're seeing in Nebraska and across the country is exactly in those long-term care and senior citizen facilities. And so we are moving very rapidly to more testing of the staff, and not just testing and being one and done, but periodically testing. And also testing of many of the residents of these facilities, particularly if one of them turns out to be positive and sick, because we know that that's how the virus tends to spread. As I said earlier, it's sort of like a tinderbox kind of situation. So I think that, you know, as we said earlier, what is this going to mean to Nebraskans? It's going to mean that those that are most vulnerable, those that are older, those that have some of these well-known comorbidities, you know, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the heart disease, the lung disease, etc., they are going to be the last to open up. They're going to be the last, and as sad as that is, because, you know, my wife and I have a 93-year-old parent that lives in one of these senior citizen facilities, and she's really well cared for, and I appreciate that. But we haven't seen her face to face. I mean, we see her electronically, and I talk to her as often as we can. But there's a loneliness that goes with that. You know, human beings are social creatures. We enjoy each other's company. Even if we don't agree about everything we talk about, we enjoy the ability to agree to disagree as well. And that discourse that we're deprived of right now, you know, we've done a pretty good job of tolerating it, but I think as time goes on, it's going to get harder. And by the way, you know, speaking about UNO for a minute, we hear that from our students. I mean, we just did a large survey of our students. Over 2,000 students responded about their experiences. It was amazing. Everything from incoming freshmen to the future members of the senior class next fall. And they were all very grateful for the experience they had. Not all, but, you know, nearly all. And what they said was that safety of their health and their protection was the highest priority they had. They did not want to run the risk of getting their family members infected, but they also said, I want to come back to campus. I want the college experience. So we're going to have to do that blend of both, and we are planning to.
Well, I want to ask you, for those people who are missing their loved ones in the older adult realm, when the question is asked, so where are we with this virus? Some of them really aren't tuning into the news that much. They aren't really as up to speed, and some with cognition issues who are confused as to why you're still outside or on the other side of the window on the phone. How would you respond when those older adults who you know feel isolated, they ask you, when is this going to be over? When is this going to get back to the way it used to be?
So I have a lot of those conversations with folks. And then, there's another whole category of not just older folks, but people who don't have a friend or a colleague that actually got infected. People who don't believe that this is actually going to have an impact on their community. And that's been rather prevalent, actually, in some of the smaller rural communities across the nation. Tragically, those numbers are falling because almost all of even the very small communities have now seen some individuals infected. So I respond to them by just talking to them about what's going on, the data, but also to talk about my own personal experiences, about how many friends and colleagues of mine I know have been ill in this community, here in Omaha, here in Nebraska, and how sick it made them. And tragically, I have a number of longtime friends from the East Coast and the Boston area where I worked for many years who not only were hospitalized and placed on ventilators, but actually passed away. And normally, those are funerals and memorial services that I would have personally attended, but was just absolutely unable to do that. I mean, just Monday night I was talking with Lieutenant Governor Foley, and he just lost his sister, passed away from, I believe, cancer in the Connecticut area. And he couldn't be with her during the last weeks. And the family had to defer a memorial service, which is something that they would normally do. And those are the kinds of events, tragedies that really pull at your heartstrings, that really make this all so difficult. But as you know, I'll tell you, I always end the discussion with family members, friends who ask that exact question, is as painful as this is, as isolated and lonely as we feel, and believe me, I feel that every day, beats the heck out of being in an intensive care unit on a ventilator.
Yeah, and you really are driving home the importance of safety first, and you've mentioned some examples here today. I want to go back into the university system briefly. I know you've put in place, as we look ahead to the fall semester, the 5S strategy.
Yeah.
We're going to put those up for our viewers as you briefly walk us through each of those S's.
So it's pretty straightforward. I guess that's a good way to describe the 5 S's. We want safety at the top of the list. We want to be absolutely sure that all of our decision making is driven by safety, not only of our students, but of their families and their colleagues. Many of our students work. A lot of our students live with their parents or grandparents, and we've got to be careful of that. It's got to be simple and smart. And what I mean by that is it can't be 47 pages of 8-point font to understand what we're doing. If we can't describe it in a 30-second soundbite, it's probably not something that we can get people to understand. And it's got to be thoughtful, and of course, it's got to be successful. And meaning we've got to use benchmarks, we've got to be data-driven, we've got to always be asking the questions of what could we do differently. And then we want to systematize this. That is to say, we don't want every decision to be a one-off decision. We want to have organized, for instance, we have now 6 groups of leaders across the institution, faculty, students, and staff. And I want to call out Jabin, the president of our student government and the UNO student region, who's a rock star. He came to us and said, when we're planning the fall semester, we need to think about the diversity and the equity and the inclusivity of our campus. And we need to think about what that means when over half your students, or about half your students, are first-generation students. And so Jabin actually now chairs the 6th out of the 6 work groups that are planning the fall semester. And he's convened the senior leaders of the organization around the table, again, 6 feet apart, or mostly on Zoom, but to have those parts of discussions. But everything from residence halls to athletics, dining facilities, de-densifying classrooms, environmental services. So for instance, we've looked at every single building on the campus to see what the air circulation turnover is. We're looking at making sure that we close the entrances and exits to every building, and so we have single entrances and single exits so you don't have everybody crossing each other. I mean, these are simple things, but they're going to make life and death ramifications long term. Take it from me.
Thank you. Final question in the 2 minutes we have remaining. Vaccines. Where
Sure.
are we with that, Dr. Gold?
Well, vaccine development continues at a lightning speed across the United States. There are somewhere between 3 and 5, I think closer to 5 now, commercially manufactured vaccines that are in clinical trials. Clinical trials for vaccines consist of 2 major components. The first piece, after the vaccine has been manufactured and tested in the laboratory, the first phase is safety, so that's a small number of people, typically 50 people or so, generally young and healthy, just to look for side effects of the vaccine. And then what happens after that is efficacy testing. And that's when you need a much larger population of individuals to be sure that you can actually prevent the vaccine, use the vaccine to prevent the disease. And so right now, optimistically speaking, the winter holidays I think would probably be the earliest that we'd really be able to start to scale the manufacture, because even when these trials are done, we're going to need, hundreds of millions of doses of these vaccines. Now, how many people are going to agree to be vaccinated, that's a whole other story, but hopefully it's going to beat the heck out of the ramifications of getting this disease. Critically speaking, if we cannot create immunity in between 60 and 70% of the population, we will never fully reopen. That's the minimum number currently estimated for herd immunity. So 60 to 70% of America is 220 million people. That's a lot of vaccination.
Okay, we will definitely keep our eyes on that. I want to put up a few graphics for viewers who are wanting a little more information today, talking about COVID-19
Sure.
with Dr. Gold. Reopening phase 2. Nebraska Medicine, 402-552-2000. That's nebraskamed.com/COVID. And of course, the University of Nebraska at Omaha, 402-554-2800. That website, unomaha.edu/coronavirus. Dr. Gold, I want to thank you so much for being here and for
My
sharing
pleasure.
your time, your talent, your stories. You're a wealth of information. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Best wishes to you moving forward. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.